Welcome back to the third part of the Azure DevOps .NET MAUI pipeline series. In the previous videos, we covered building our Windows and Android .NET MAUI apps with Azure DevOps, where we talked about a multi-tiered system where we have pipelines, and inside the pipelines we can have multiple stages. Inside those stages, we can have multiple jobs and we can set dependencies between them. And we talked about how to create a template to reuse steps between jobs or reuse jobs as well. And we actually also signed our Android app and published both the Android and Windows artifacts to DevOps so that we can consume that in our release pipeline later on. So in this video, we'll be extending on that script to build our iOS .NET MAUI app by creating a second stage and running a macOS agent to be performing our iOS job. We'll be reusing our setup template that we set up in the previous video. So you might want to have a look at some of the previous videos just to gain an understanding on how to set up our pipeline. After we've completed our setup template, we can then install our provisioning profile and certificate and build and sign our iOS app and publish that to our artifacts as well. So coming back to our pipeline script, where we previously set up our Windows and Android stage and created our Windows and Android jobs and also set a dependency on our Android job to depend on the Windows job. And we also created the setup template that we're using in both those jobs that we'll also be using on our iOS job. So we now want to add a second stage for our iOS build. So for now, while I'm doing my testing for iOS, I'm going to comment all of this out to save on those build minutes. In case something goes wrong, then I'm not waiting for my Windows and Android jobs to first finish. So I'm going to go here and add stage. I'm going to call this iOS stage with a display name of iOS stage. And I want to select a pool now, and we're still going to be using Azure pipelines, but we'll obviously need a macOS agent to build our iOS app. So if we go to the link that Microsoft provided for us at the top, and we go to pools, or pool here on the side, and you scroll down and go to hosted images, and scroll all the way up, you can see all the images that are available to us. So if we target macOS latest, we'll actually be targeting macOS 12. And with MAUI, you'll run into an issue if you're targeting macOS 12. You need to be at least targeting macOS 13. So at this stage, I'm going to target that directly. I'm going to paste that in there to make sure I don't make a typo. And then we want to start with our jobs. So we're going to add a job in here called iOS job with a display name of iOS job. And inside that, we want our steps. The first step that we want to add is the setup template that we also used on our Windows and Android jobs. So I'm going to copy that over to here, which will automatically perform all the steps inside the setup template file that we set up last time. This time, I would like to add the iOS workload as well to make sure that we can build for iOS. I'm going to add it in there and save. And there we have our entire setup already added to our iOS job. From here, I'm going to add the .NET publish command again. I'm going to copy and paste that from my Windows job and just uncomment that. Fix the indentation. The display name is going to be build iOS MAUI app. we're still targeting the same CS proj, but our framework this time is .NET 8 iOS. It's also a release configuration, and the output I'm going to put in an iOS subdirectory. So building the app like this will result in an issue since you can't actually build an iOS app in release mode without signing it. But I do want to show you what happens if we try and run it this way. So I'm also going to add the publish build artifact as we had it before, even though we know it's going to fail on the previous step. So I'm going to just say publish iOS app to artifacts from my iOS subdirectory, and the artifact's name is going to be iOS. There we go. We can commit and push this to our pipeline. So if you recall correctly from the first video, we set up a trigger so that whenever we push code to our production branch through Git, it will automatically kick off a build on Azure DevOps. So going to our pipelines, we can have a look at what's executing here. And it correctly pulled in our template to set our .NET version. So these steps are now being replicated through all three jobs. And it's installing our MAUI workloads, including our iOS MAUI workload. And we can see it executed the show working current directory, but our build iOS MAUI app failed. And it says no valid iOS code signing keys found in keychain. So basically it's saying, because you're doing a release build, you need to sign this app. To be able to sign our iOS app, we'll need both a certificate and a provisioning profile. Certificates are essentially a way of identifying the developer, very similar to a key store from Android. And then a provisioning profile is kind of a way to tie everything together. And you'll typically have a certificate that can sign multiple apps, but each app would require a provisioning profile of its own. So the first thing that you'll need for this is actually getting an Apple developer account. And it's quite pricey. It's the priciest one of the three. So the first thing that you'll need is a certificate. So you can log into your developer.apple.com and sign in with your developer account and go to the certificates tab. And we're going to click on create certificate if you don't have one already. And then we need to select the type of certificate that we need. So during development, you'll be using your development certificate to sign. But for our pipeline, we want to use the Apple distribution certificate. So we're going to select that one, since this is what we're going to use to actually push to the store as well in the end, once we've done our production build with the pipeline. I'm going to click continue. And then it's going to ask you to upload a certificate signing request. And for this part, you do need a Mac. I've seen some guides going through how you can generate a certificate signing request from a Windows PC. And I've tried it in the past, but unfortunately, I didn't have too much luck with it. If this is something that you're interested in knowing how to do, drop a comment and I'll see if I can create a video on it. So heading over to my Mac, you can open Spotlight Search and search for keychain access by pressing Command Space. And then going to the menu at the top and selecting the certificate assistant, and then selecting request a certificate from a certificate authority. In the wizard, provide a user email address and a common name. You can leave the CA email address blank. Select Save to Disk and click Continue. Find a suitable place to store the certificate signing request so that we can upload that to App Store Connect. Great, so now that we've generated our signing request, we can upload that file to developer.apple.com. Make sure you have the correct one selected and then continue. It will give you the certificate details, and then it'll give you a .cer file to download that will need to import into our keychain access on our Mac, that we can export a P12 file that will finally be able to upload to Azure DevOps. So coming back to our Mac, we can just double click on the .cer file and that will get loaded into our keychain access. So if we open keychain access, we can right click on our certificate and select export Apple distribution certificate. Select a suitable location to store your .p12 certificate file. It will prompt you to create a password for your certificate. This is the password that will actually be used when signing an app. So we'll actually also have to add this password to Azure DevOps secret variables. Once you've added a strong enough password, it will then prompt you for your max password to actually be able to export this key. So to be able to create a provisioning profile, we'll first need an identifier. So you can do that by going to the Identifiers tab and clicking on the plus button. Here, we'll have to select one of many categories, which is going to be the app IDs, since we'll actually want to be able to identify an app. Continue, and we want to do an app here, so continue. Here we can provide a description. So I'm going to call this MAUI Pipelines Distribution, which is MAUI Pipelines. And we can provide a bundle ID here. So this is usually in the format of company's name dot the app's name. And if you need additional capabilities for your app, you can select it from this list. And we can say continue. But first, let's copy this bundle ID because we're going to need to specify that on our MAUI apps CS project as well. Then it just gives us a confirmation page. So I'm going to click register. So just quickly navigating to our repository with our MAUI project and opening that in Visual Studio. I just want to make a quick edit to the CS project to align with the bundle ID that we just specified in the identifier on App Store Connect. And here you can see we have app identifier here in the application ID tag. And then we can replace the contents in that to align exactly with what we specified on App Store Connect. Just going to commit this for now. But I'm not going to push it yet since I don't want to kick off another build yet. So now that our identifier has been set up, we can go over to the Profiles tab on the developer.apple.com website and click on the plus to add a provisioning profile. So provisioning profile just kind of ties everything together, your ID and the certificate that is used to sign this app and all of it. So again, if you were using this for development purposes, you would choose an option under the development category. But since our pipeline is doing our production build, we're going to choose one under the distribution category. And we're going to choose the App Store Connect one because we actually want to submit our IPA to App Store Connect to test it through TestFlight and, hopefully eventually submit it for review to actually go onto the App Store. Great, so we can select continue. And then it asks us to select our app ID that we just created. So from this drop down, we're just going to select that one. Great, we can continue. And then it asks us to select the certificate which we also just created. So currently we only have the one option. So continue. And then it just asks us to provide a provisioning profile name. So I'm just going to write here just an identifier to try and find this provisioning profile. And then you can click generate and select download to download this provisioning profile. So coming back to Azure DevOps, we can then go to our library to secure files where we've uploaded our key store, and then we can upload both our provisioning profile and our distribution certificate here. I'm going to drag in my distribution certificate and then click add and upload my provisioning profile. Just going to rename this. And there we go. We have both our provisioning profile and our distribution certificate uploaded to secure files. So fortunately, there are two steps specifically made to install your Apple provisioning profile and your security certificate. So if we just Google that quickly, we see it's version 1 of the task. It is automatically set to secure files, and then you can just provide the file's name here. And the other step that we're also looking for is called install Apple certificate at 2. So we're going to need these two steps to install our provisioning profile and certificate. So I'm going to copy the provisioning profile and bring it over to my script. So we want to do this before we do our .NET publish. Just fix our indentation here. Remove the comments. So it's already in secure files, and the file's name that we want to install is our provisioning profiles file name, which is this one. So I'm going to copy it from here to make sure I don't make a typo. And then I'm just going to paste it right in there. So that will then install our provisioning profile on this virtual machine Mac. And I'm then going to go back to that second link where we had the install Apple certificate. Going to copy this and bring it over to my script. It doesn't matter in which order you install these, as long as they're both installed before you try and build your iOS app. Gonna remove the comments here. Great. And here we need to specify the file name where it says cert secure file. So I'm going to copy that from DevOps again. So that's the P12 file that we're looking for. There we go. And then we need to specify the password, which the parameter is called certpwd. And again, we don't want to specify this in plain text. So we're going to create a secret variable for this. So if you followed along in the previous video, you will have seen this process before. So I'm just going to call this iOS distribution password. And then I can head over to DevOps, go to my library in my variable group. Then I can add a new variable in here. Select the little lock to say this is a secret variable. No one should be able to see it. So now everything is set up where we have our provisioning profile installed and our certificate installed. And now we just need to reference these files when we are doing our .NET Publish. So we're going to go back to the Publish an iOS app using the command line. And if you scroll down, as I mentioned before in the previous video, that these -p are parameters that gets written into your CS proj. So we're going to need a couple of these. So this should look familiar. We currently have, up until the configuration, we have our framework set as iOS and our configuration set as release. And we want to copy the rest all the way to the end and go back to our script. And then we want to paste it after we've set our output. So we're going to have to make a couple of changes here. So we want to keep this. This basically just says it needs to create an IPA. We can leave the runtime identifier. And then we need to set a Codesign key. So I'm going to use a variable to set that instead. I'm just going to call this variable Codesign _key. And then I'm also just going to add a variable here for the provision. Call this Codesign provision. So the two variables that we need to then create is Codesign key and Codesign provision. So I'm going to copy Codesign key and paste it in here and add another one and paste in Codesign provision. So Codesign provision is just the name of that provisioning profile which we created. So we can paste that in there to make sure we didn't make a typo and select save. So then the Codesign key, if we go back to Microsoft Docs, is typically in the format of, since this is a distribution certificate that we're signing with, it's going to be Apple distribution : space, then your Apple developer account name, and then in brackets is going to be the team ID. So if you go to your Apple developer account, and in the top right corner, you'll see the account name dash and then your team ID. So that's where you can find your team ID. So you can go ahead and fill that in. Great, everything has been added that we need to actually sign this IPA with our distribution certificate and provisioning profile. So let's commit these changes and see what happens. So coming back to DevOps, the pipeline is paused since it needs permission to both the provisioning profile and signing certificate that we uploaded to secure storage. So you have to permit both files here. There we go. We can see our iOS app built successfully in about 6 minutes. And if we go back to the pipeline, we can see it published our IPA artifact for us. that we can then release to App Store Connect in a release pipeline. So now that I know the iOS job completed successfully, I can re-add the Windows and Android jobs. Great, so commenting back, the Windows and Android jobs resulted in all 3 jobs executing successfully in the 2 stages, and all 3 artifacts of the 3 different platforms apps were successfully published to our artifacts, and both the Android and iOS apps are signed now and ready to be released to the stores. Before I show you how to build your release pipeline, I'm first going to do a quick video on automatically versioning our apps, since you in any case need to always push a higher version to the app stores. And there are a couple of different strategies in terms of how you can version your apps. So be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on the coming videos. See you next time.